today's edition of the Market Report on ADBN Television. My name is Adefola Olamide. On today's edition, we'll also be having a two-part interview. First, we'll be reviewing the implication of brain drain on Nigerian economy. Then the second part, we'll be taking a look at the informal sector of Nigerian economy and how we can leverage on the informal sector to grow the economy. But first, brain drain is a migration of middle class and highly skilled professionals from Nigeria to other countries. This trend was initially restricted to certain professions, but it has now become a full-blown brain drain crisis in Nigeria that all other skilled individuals, skilled professionals are now leaving Nigeria. The ICT sector in Nigeria have suffered a lot in terms of people who are migrating out of the country, either in the banking sector, in the financial sector, another sector that require ICT inclined skilled professionals. But in recent time, the paradigm is shifting. A lot of individuals as well as a lot of organizations are also talking about the crisis between the brain drain issue in Nigeria. Joining me on the show to help us explain this particular crisis is Andrew Chimeze, the communication manager of African Youth Growth Foundation. A very good day to you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Now, first and foremost, the first question anybody wants to ask is, what is really brain drain? What does it really contain?
Okay, as a way of definition, brain drain is the movement of professionals, like you rightly mentioned, from a particular country to another country to seek for greener pastures. When that happens, we talk about highly skilled professionals like doctors, nurses, ICT professionals, engineers, moving from a particular country to a particular country to actually seek for better fortunes in that country.
Very interesting. Yeah. Although many people will see it as opportunity, and it's recently, is it referred also to Japa or Japaism?
Yes, Japaism or Japa as it were, it's perhaps an informal, in the local parlance, but Japa now refers to the combination of both the regular migration and the irregular migration. So for regular migration, for instance, these are skilled professionals that get highly skilled job abroad. But for Japa, anybody could just wake up and say, I want to move for greener pasture. So it could be a low-skilled worker, it could be whoever that just wants to move out there to see how he can make better fortunes for himself.
Now, talking about better fortune, this also makes a case for the economy, because we are looking at the implication on the Nigerian economy. So when we now say people are migrating out of the country in exodus in great number, but a lot of people also see it as opportunity to go and make money, do the remittances and send it back. But from your own understanding, how dangerous is brain drain to the Nigerian economy?
Yeah, it's at this time in our nation, it's worrisome. It's a thing of concern because it affects the economy badly. When you have the youth population, for instance, leaving your country, you should know that it has a ripple effect on the economy. It has a ripple effect on productivity. It has a ripple effect on the educational system, because of course those are the people that will make the educational system to be strengthened and work in Nigeria. It also has a ripple effect on the health sector. Of course, if you are losing doctors and nurses in drones, and these are people that are supposed to man these health facilities in Nigeria, if they are not here, that means there's a problem and there's a challenge. So it's multifaceted and multidimensional, because it speaks to every sector of the economy. When you keep losing your very strong or active citizens to other countries, of course you should know that the economy will be on a nosedive.
Now, I love the perspective you are giving this discussion, because it now prompts me to ask this question. What are the causes? I've heard and read a lot of articles. I even wrote one about brain drain in Nigeria. I wrote one today that I'm going to publish on our ADBN website. But I've heard a lot of people talking about the causes. There is what they call the push and pull causes. Yes. I don't know whether you can help us break that down.
Okay, the causes of brain drain can be there is of course there are personal and psychological causes, but because we are speaking of the economic issues at this point, I think some of the causes includes because these skilled workers see a better livelihood in advanced countries or in the Western countries, so there is that push or that drive to get better for economic reasons, to get better economic fortunes. So I think that is one of the causes, because the living conditions, the issues of wages, remuneration, the issues of working conditions in Nigeria, is one of the reasons why, are some of the reasons why people will be forced to look for other opportunities elsewhere, and I think, of course, not also looking at for futuristic reasons, because of course they feel that there are better opportunities out there for their children, better working conditions, better security, and a retirement plan also. So when looking at it holistically, people are better placed to say that I want to go out there because I feel that I will make more for myself. It will place me on a better level than being in Nigeria here.
But talking about being in Nigeria here, we're a banker earning as much as 500,000, 700,000 monthly, japa, and went to UK and is working in as a janitor, is working as a cleaner, and someone is saying, so that is it basically because of the earning power or any parity between the developed countries that most of our people japa to or migrate to, or because of security of welfare packages? Which one comes first to their mind?
Of course, just to speak to that, there are so many misconceptions as to what happens out there, and I think it is one thing that the youth of our youth of our time need to begin to take cognizance of, because it is not all rosy out there. Most times people give a wrong impression or give a wrong information as to what is obtainable out there. But like you rightly mentioned again, when a highly placed individual in Nigeria, like a bank manager, goes out there, it's strange because of course maybe he's not able to get the kind of job that he is getting in Nigeria. But again, looking at it from a humanistic point of view, it is degrading at that level to say that he's going out there to work as a janitor, as a cleaner, and these things are very rampant. So I think the issues of misinformation and perception as to what happens out there needs to begin to come out, and people must begin to, we must begin to tell ourselves the truth that it is not all rosy out there, and these opportunities are not readily available, as it were. So beyond looking at the exchange gains or the exchange rates, that people tend to see that, okay, if you earn a particular amount here, if you go out there, no matter what you do, you earn better. But it's not always the case, because at the end of the day, what is the integrity and the dignity for you as a human being, so it's beyond economic reasons. What job satisfaction are you getting, from what you are doing? Is it what you've been trained to do, or are you just doing it for the livelihood or just for survival? So those are some of the reasons people must begin to look at.
I think when you talk about the survival, I think most Nigerians look at the survival aspect, especially the irregular migrant that we are now seeing, that we can nickname the Japa syndrome, the Japa exponent. But on the other hand, is it that the government economic policy have failed woefully that is making Nigerians to just migrate? Or I'll just answer that question because
not to say or not to push it on government, because of course if everything were to be working as it is, lesser people will move, but even at that, people still move regardless. The people still move from advanced countries to other advanced countries. So movement is part of human existence, But just to also say that government policies have not failed. Of course, these are a gradual work in progress that is sectorial, the healthcare sector, the reforms, the economic sector reforms, and other reforms that are going on in the country. So I can't say that government policies have failed in its entirety, but I think that government needs to do more in order to begin to invest trust, you know, and make citizens believe in their policies and programs. Take, for instance, the NEL fund policy that is ongoing right now, where people can access loan to go to school. I think that's kind of policy is very laudable on the part of the government, and it will help people to stay, because if I can access tertiary education through a loan, why should I embark on an irregular migration when I can be in this country and still get some level of education? So not to say government policies have failed, but to say that government needs to do more in, you know, in terms of transparency, in terms of fiscal governance, in terms of trying to also ensure that the citizens understand some of these policies, and these policies are for the betterment and the interest of the citizens.
Exactly. You know why I asked that question is that I remember in 2020 when we had the NSAS protest, majority of the people at that point in time in Nigeria, that was when we had one of the highest migrant of Nigerian experts, professionals out of the country during that protest and after that protest. And one of the reasons why they leave the country in drove was that the government policy is not working, particularly economic policy. You could also remember the aftermath of the protests and the rest of them. But let's move away from that and also look at the concrete aspect of it. It is a global issue. The regular and irregular migration that you mentioned earlier when we started the show is quite a keen concern for government across the world. But in Nigerian case, from your own understanding as someone who is working within that corridor of migration, the irregular migration and the rest of them, how do you see government effort in tackling some of these menace of brain drain in Nigeria?
Yes, there are ongoing reforms in the health sector, for instance. There is also the ICT sector, trying to see how especially the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, trying to see how they can train people, you know, and various sectors are also trying to see how the youth will be carried along in what they do. But it's now become a norm or a trend in Nigeria where the youth don't believe in whatever the government is doing. So that is one challenge. You know, and I think beyond looking at what government needs to do, the youths, we need to also begin to understand how we can not just be onlookers, but participate, you know, to make it work for us, you know, because the government needs to put in the right laws, you know, in terms of the making the environment conducive, in terms of putting in the right policies, the right framework, you know, in terms of issues of tax, you know, in terms of issues of local manufacturing, you know, these are some of the things government need to begin to put in place and begin to see how indigenous companies, you know, are helped or assisted to make wave. But I also think that it's a two-way thing. The youth also need to understand that it's the pendulum does not only go on the government end. There is also need for them to play their own part in trusting in the policies and ensuring that those policies work.
I really accept what you have just said right now, because if the government really want the youth to be abide to stay back in Nigeria, they must bring about policy that will ensure that they carry the youth along. Although the government have been talking about financial inclusivity, development inclusivity, political inclusivity, and the rest of them, but the key aspect that most youth normally complain is that when this economic policy are being ushered in by the government, as if it ends at the middle ground, it doesn't get down to the downtrodden, and that's why I see that poor families are now taking advantage of this brain drain to save money, sell their houses, and send their young ones abroad. I know you must have heard about stories of people selling their houses, then sponsor them abroad, hoping that remittances will come. Just a report I read this morning about CBN. CBN is doing what they call diaspora BVN. And one of the key easy reasons why they are doing that is for them to be able to raise at least $1 billion as remittances. And guess where the money will come from? From Nigerians who are abroad. So what I'm trying to point out as a question is that what can the government do? Particularly CBN yesterday released the MPR MPC rate, which show how you can borrow money from the bank and how you can also borrow money from there. But all this also play critical role in the economy that the youth are looking onto. So what can the CBN do in this regard? Okay,
just to answer your initial question, of course, some of these policies don't go down. It stops at the middle, or sometimes it doesn't even start. You know, sometimes it is being hijacked by fellow Nigerians, as it were. You know, and the targets are the downtrodden. The targets are those that need it the most. If these policies don't get to them, of course they will begin to think of other ways to access or look for ways to ensure that their own person is sponsored abroad in order to bring in the remittances. These are issues that the government need to begin to look at in terms of reforms. These are the issues of corruption, where this policies, the frameworks, don't go down to the people that are in need, those that need it the most, those that it has been targeted to get to. And if some of these things are curbed, if corruption agencies or anti-corruption agencies are strengthened to ensure that the loopholes are blocked, because sometimes there are genuine intentions for these policies, but at the middle, these policies are hijacked, by politicians to say that we need to favor a particular. So the issues of regional, tribal sentiments begin to, deviate, and divert such policies to who does not need it. So we've seen these things over time, and that is why people don't, believe that any policy that comes out will, serve their interest. They just believe that these policies will not go down well. It will somersault in the middle. So I think those are areas that the government need to look at to ensure that some of these things get down to those who need it the most. So people must there must be an evaluation, there must be tracking, or there must be monitoring of these policies to ensure that those that it is targeted to benefit are actually the main beneficiaries. And also there's also the issues of information. We need to begin to tell the real story, that if everybody leaves the country, then who will build the country? Those are very critical questions that we must start asking. If every medical doctor leaves, and every nurse leaves, and every engineer leaves, so who is left? Who will be charged with the responsibility?
That means who are we going to leave Nigeria for?
Who are we going to leave Nigeria? Is it just going to be an empty land, at the end of the day? So we must begin to ask these questions and begin to find answers to these questions.
And just like what you said, yesterday I had a guest on my show when we looked at the policy information of the government. Economy policy information of the government. And he also said something very critical on the issue yesterday. Without information literacy, many Nigerians don't even know what the government is. And you also pointed out we need information on every government policy, which is very critical. And on the issue of brain drain, we have seen that government is doing a lot in the area of economy. You mentioned the net fund. There's also the conditional cash can draw. And just yesterday, someone was telling me that in Nasarawa State, local government, people are about to be receiving about 75,000 naira. And I was in a particular sister station some weeks back, and I heard a jungo that was talking about Nigerians will be receiving 75,000. But how many Nigerians even know about this thing? So if we don't have that information literacy in our society, definitely government will just be doing what they want to do, and people will be left in vacuum. So on the other hand, let's now begin to focus on the way forward, because we really need the way forward. And brain drain is not a Nigerian problem, it's a global issue. And that's why we have the issue of regular migration and regular migration. On the other hand, we have identified our own as Japa or Japaism. But from a global perspective, from a political economy understanding also, which I know you are quite inclined to, there is inequality in the global south and the global north. And this is also one of the things that is fueling this massive migration of professionals and the rest of them. So let's take a global perspective of it first in terms of solution. What do you think we can do globally to really reduce some of this massive exodus of professionals and experts from developing and developing countries like Nigeria?
Okay, I think one of the things we can do is because some of these people don't just, especially those that embark on regular migration, they don't just wake up to leave. You know, they also have connections or people out there. You know, they have established contact and links out there to say that I'm coming to do a particular job. Of course, and sometimes there are unethical recruitment of those in those sectors. You know, take for instance in the health sector, if there are no proper recruitment, you know, in terms of having bilateral understanding between countries, you know, people can just leave because a hospital can just wake up and say, okay, we are recruiting 1,000 doctors, and if it is not well documented, if these recruitments are not done in a proper way, Nigerians will just find their way to that place regardless. Do you understand? So those are some of the issues, and countries must begin to have this agreement to say that instead of these things being done in those advanced countries, why don't you bring them here? If it's entrepreneurship, if there are industries, you know, why don't you bring them here, train the people that are supposed to be here to get the job done here? You know, of course, they cash in on labor, you know, because there's sufficient labor in this country, you know, so they can cash in on labor. And also some of the aids and reforms, you know, some of them can also be brought in to support, you know, industries, manufacturing in this country. So I think that in as much as we say that there is this asymmetric relationship between advanced and the developing countries, it's something that could be leveled up to see how the developing countries can also understand that these irregular migrations have an effect, have a consequence on the economy of developing countries, and try to do the needful in order to ensure that there's a balance in terms of what goes into their country and how there's a ripple effect on the developing countries.
Exactly. I also support that perspective that you are bringing on. Let's now look at the aspect of it all. First and foremost, you have to be clear on this. The Nigerian government is looking for remittances in dollars. So if critically you can say, okay, maybe the government also have a careless attitude towards these skillful professionals that are going out. I just read in one of the news headlines today that most of our PhD holders and lecturers are leaving the country. That there are shortage of academic staff in our universities across Nigeria. That's one. Now, government is looking for remittances to show up our external reserve so that we can show up our naira value and the rest of them, which is quite very interesting. But on the other hand, what can they do to ensure that even these professionals that are going out, that will be helping us to sell remittances, we can moderate their exposure to either by JAPA or by irregular migration or regular migration?
Yeah, I think that, or I don't believe that these remittances from this those that have left this country is something that government needs to look up to, because of course, if you have developed your manufacturing sector, if you have developed your economy, if you have invested in entrepreneurship, if you have invested in education and research, I don't think you have a better working condition for people here. So I don't think so. What you can do at best is to export. So if you need remittances, if you need, if you want to show up your reserves, you need to export, not to wait for those that are there.
And be exporting our skillful individuals as a product.
Yes, as product, which for me is the other way around. So what you need to do is to ensure that you have an enabling environment that will give room for you to export services and goods, not individuals. You know, by the time you begin to do that, you get more liquidity to show up some of these debts and what have you in the country. So I think that the government needs to do more in terms of research. I think that the government needs to do more in terms of investing. I think that the government needs to do more in terms of especially in terms of technology. Technology is broad, ICT, you know.
But they are already training people in ICT. And one of the key essence of that training, because critically, some of us have looked at those training, they are training about 6 million Nigerian youth on how to use different devices in the ICT. But guess what? The aim is to also export them as a labor. I don't know whether anybody have taken a critical look at those.
It is sad because what you are doing is just to fuel the brain drain. The money is used in training those people, those Nigerians, is from the coffers of government. So at the end of the day, if their training don't benefit the country, then there's a challenge. So I think that the government must also ensure that those that are taking NEL fund, those that are getting trainings for government from government, needs to invest back into the society. I think there should be a way of giving back to the society. There should be a way of ensuring that those people don't just jackpot, because you cannot get a skill from government or at the expense of government money, and you just leave the country to use the skill for the development of another country.
Andrew, I have to thank you so much for coming on the show. We don't have much time to deeper, but from what we have said so far, migration of this kind have serious implications on the economy, particularly the irregular one or regular one that our skilled professionals are leaving the country in droves. Just this morning, one of the newspaper headlines said PhD holders, lecturers are in shortage in our universities, and most of them are looking outward to travel out of the country. And also there's a report that said that over 2 billion have been spent to train medical doctors in Nigeria. But here are we. Where are the doctors? Andrew, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, sir.
We hope to do this one more time again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, sir. Thank you.